Hello and welcome back, or welcome if you're new. If you're new here, my name is Elena. I'm the homeschooling mama to 3 kiddos. Here on the channel, we talk about everything from homeschooling, homemaking, all the things in between. We're going to talk books, kind of my December and overall 2023 wrap up, and see if we can cram it all in together. Let's get into it. I'm pulling up my Storygraph app on the computer here because it's got all the numbers and everything in there. I think I did really good this year with actually tracking everything on the Storygraph app. I'm on there. I think I leave my handle in the description below if you want to be friends, if you're on Storygraph as well. But let's take a look. I really love that Storygraph does so many of the data information for you, and it does a lot of graphs and then it does a wrap up at the end of the year as well. But for my reading stats for 2023, I had put my goal at reading 80 books and I ended up reading 138 books. I set it at 80 because I'm a big mood reader and I didn't want to put pressure on myself to read a huge number of books and then just start reading books just to hit that number, just trying to get through them to get to that number. So I wanted to set my reading goal at something that I felt was doable for me, but didn't give me a lot of pressure on having to fulfill like a larger number. So that's why I went with 80. I ended up reading 138 books. I finished one book, I think, on New Year's Eve. I didn't think I was going to finish it in time for it to count towards December, but I did. It was an ebook that I had already started and I went ahead and finished it up. We'll go over the December reads in a second, but I read 138 books and the page total was 46,520. I'll be honest though, I don't pay too much attention to the page goals and the page totals because they don't always match up when you put the books in, and I don't always want to put a brand new, like go to the trouble of putting in a new book just to get the correct page numbers. So I'm not too big on page numbers. I just kind of go with books more often, but I do set a page number goal. So most of my reading, not a huge surprise, was fiction. Like I said, I'm a mood reader, but I also read as an escape. I like to read just to give myself a moment away, just to escape a lot of times the news and the chaos, and it's just a nice break for me. So I read a lot of feel-good, lighthearted books, but I did get 10% of my books were nonfiction. The biggest genres that I was reading was romance and young adult, and then contemporary fantasy. I did read more fantasies this year. I even ventured in and read my first Sanderson book, Brandon Sanderson book, and then I read a second one this year by him. And so I'm hoping that in 2024 I'll be able to pick up a couple more from him. I do enjoy his books, well, the two that I read, and but they are really thick books. So I don't know, like it's a commitment. So I think I will be reading more fantasy. We'll see. And then after that, historical, and then religion, which kind of surprised me because I wouldn't really consider myself a historical fiction like that. I'll read it, but oftentimes it's not the ones that I'm drawn to. But apparently I am because it made the top 5, 10, whatever that was. 1, 2, I made the top 5. Most of my books were in print at 57%. 38% was digital. These 9 books that don't have a format, they are, I don't know how to set it to digital, but they were digital books. So that number should be a little bit more. And then my audio was just 4%. My biggest, these are most read authors. This Jennifer Schiaverini, I don't know if I pronounced her last name right. That makes sense because you'll see in December, I'm going to go over what we read in December. Actually, one of my biggest reading months in the month of December, but I was reading the Elm Creek Quilt series books. I have most of them. I'm missing 2 of them. I've pieced it together, like buying used books and things like that. And so I don't know how I missed 2, but I missed 2. And so I'm hoping in January, maybe I can add those to my collection. But I was going through those books just one right after another this month, and so that makes sense to me why she is the biggest, most read author for this year. My highest months were the winter months, which I had expected. winter months, we're kind of cozying in more. We're not going out as often, or we're trying not to. And winter months can kind of get seasonally sad. Also, I feel like, I don't know, the news is constantly going, but I don't know if it just hits harder in the winter or it feels like they just really push out. It's tougher to find good news. So I mentioned before that I kind of read to escape, and I just need a mental break, that I will dive into a book and into that world there. So to me, it makes sense that in the winter months, the cooler months, is when I'm reading the most. In January, I was at 15, February 16, and then it starts to dip down in the summer months. My least amount was 7 books in July, and then my most, like I said, was December at 17 books. So let's talk about December. In December, I read 17 books apparently, but also in December I got really sick at the beginning of the month, and I was able to do some reading in between there. I had a lot of downtime, forced downtime, because I got really sick. So for the first couple weeks, for the first half of the month really, I was just kind of out and down for the count. And so I was pulling books off my shelf. I used that time to catch up with the Elm Creek Quilt series, and those are the ones that I was just kind of reading one right after another, because it is a series type book. If you've never heard of those books or that series, it does have, I don't want to say they're all lighthearted, because there are some very serious subjects that they talk about. Of friends, it's a story about this group of friends, and they create a quilt camp. And so it goes back and forth from the present day and what's happening in these women's lives. And it even goes into not just talking about the core group of friends, but some of the books dive into some of the women that are coming to the camp and their stories. And then some of the books will flash back and tell the history, or the history of the founders' family, and it dives in and tells their stories. And so there's references to the Civil War, because that is the era that her family grew up. They immigrated over, and so it talks a little about that, I think, in the beginning of the books. Just so it goes back and forth between historical and present day. So it's kind of neat that it is a series, but it's not all linear, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyways, if you've not heard of it and you're looking for one, I would suggest them. But I check out a lot of books from the library, so I don't always have the physical books anymore to share with you as I finish reading them, or at the end of the month wrap up. Normally what I try to do, if you've seen any of the other monthly wrap ups, is after I finish a book, I will immediately try to take a minute and go over the book and my thoughts on it. So it's in clips throughout the month, and then we just put it all together for one video, because one, I'm a mom of 3, and sometimes it's difficult to find the time to sit down and do a whole day of filming, or even just getting moments like this. Today I'm incredibly blessed because my husband's home, and so we may have a minute uninterrupted, but I digress. And then 2, the other reason that I like to do it that way is that sometimes I'll just forget. As I'm reading, I'll just go into another story and another timeline and another whatever, and I think my brain does kind of this Dory thing where I'm like, oh, I did read that book, but what was it about again? So I like to wrap it up while it's fresh on my mind. But I didn't do that this month because, like I said, I was out for almost half a month. But let's run through as quickly as I can, what I read in December. I started with His Amish Sweetheart. This is a book by Jennifer Beckstrand. I don't always rate my books. I'm not quite sure if I want to go into 2024 and make sure that I rate every single book, because sometimes I'm just reading it for fun, and that's okay, that's where I left it in my mind. Anyways, this book was a sweet book. I wanted to read this because I believe that this was, oh no, I was going to say I think this one was part of a series, but this wasn't. This was just an Amish read, a digital one that I think I picked up just to have a digital read to read. I will try to do digital reading in the evening so that I don't disturb my husband having a reading light on in when he's trying to go to sleep. So I usually have a digital book and a physical book, and sometimes I also have an audio book going all at the same time. I guess I could do the same book on all 3 versions if I could find it, you know, if it was readily available at the library or if I had them, but I'm not that coordinated enough to be able to know where I stopped off in the physical book and then change my digital and audio to match. So I just usually am going with 3 different stories at a time. But then I read Fancy Meeting You Here by Julie too. I've read a couple of her other books and I've enjoyed them. This one follows Elise and all of her girlfriends are getting married and she's kind of like the only one that's not. Lo and behold, of course, one of her girlfriend's brothers that's been kind of MIA. They don't really, they've grown up together. They were all college friends, but the brother, I don't know if she's never met him or he's just been not in the family picture for quite some years. But of course, he's in the picture now because his sister's getting married. Elise is there because it's one of her best friends. And on we go with the adventures. This is sort of a lovers to, or enemies to lovers type thing. They don't like each other when they first meet. But it's a feel-good romance, so you can guess the ending. It was an enjoyable read. Like I said, I read a couple of our other books and I like her as an author. The other thing this month or December, it's not December anymore at the time of filming, but another thing that I started in December was the ACOTAR series. I've never read it, and I think I just passed it in the library one day and they had the first couple books, so I thought, why not, let's try it. I've heard about it a lot on Instagram and on BookTube, and so I checked out the first 2 books, A Court of Thorn and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury. I have just checked out, if you follow me on Instagram, you probably saw that I just checked out the next 2 in the series, but like I mentioned there, I'm not quite sure how far I'm going to get in the series because I've heard that it gets spicier as the series goes on, and book 2 was already kind of on the edge for my taste. It's just me personally. Everybody has their own most of the time I think you can just like skim over it, but I've heard that it gets there as the book goes, there's more of it, so it may be harder to skip through. So I don't know if I'll get through the whole series. I'd like to, because I don't like to leave series undone, but if it gets to be too much, then maybe it's just too much for me personally, like I said, but to each their own. So I do hear that the fans of the series seem to be like die-hard fans though, so that's why I would like to finish it, because the world is interesting, but yeah, I don't know how the spice factor is going to do. But I did finish the first 2 books in the series. Then I switched over and I read A Twisted Tale. This is the Twisted Tale number 14. If you're not familiar with the Twisted Tales, they take like usually a Disney character and they give a what if question. So this month, so December, I read When You Wish Upon a Star, and this was what if the Blue Fairy wasn't supposed to help Pinocchio. And so it kind of, this one talks about more from the perspective of the Blue Fairy, how she became the Blue Fairy, what the rules were as a fairy, and how she kind of broke them. And so it dives into that, and it's just really fun. I like to read a lot of the Twisted Tales. I do have another one right now checked out from the library as well. Then I went, this is the book I was thinking of, Listening to Love, An Amish Journey, Book 2 by Beth Wiseman. This is the one originally I thought the other Amish book I read was part of the series. It's this one. This one, I found this book, I actually own this one, and I found it at our local Dollar Tree. So I was like, oh, look at this. And I've seen books at the Dollar Tree. I thought about doing maybe a Dollar Tree reading video, but we'll see. But I purchased this one and I didn't realize that it was a second. I was able to find the first one in the digital reads at one of my libraries. So I read that, I believe, in November, and then I finally finished this one. So this one, we're continuing on with 3 main characters for now. Natalie is the friend to an Amish couple, and she is becoming friendlier with the husband's brother. So they are friends, but of course the boys are Amish, and Natalie is not. And so we kind of are going through, they both think that they can just be friends, but then as it goes on, as the relationship deepens, they're finding that it's harder and harder to just be friends, and they're trying to decide, is this something that they can pursue, or is it best for them to just walk away because their worlds are so different? Then we jumped into the Elm Creek quilt series. I went from book 7, the Sugar Camp quilt, to book 8, the Christmas quilt. Book 9 was the Circle of Quilters, and book 10, the Quilters Homecoming. Book 11 was the New Year's quilt, 12, The Winding Ways, 13, The Quilter's Kitchen. I will say with The Quilter's Kitchen, that book is a thin book. I can show you. So I do need to organize my bookshelf, but these books are actually multiple books in one. And then we read We together, right? This is another 2 books in one, but this is The Quilter's Kitchen, and it is a pretty thin book, and there's lots of recipes in here. So it's a super simple read. You could probably do it in an hour or 2, depending how quickly you read. And then it goes on to here, and then these are not. These are separate, different books. But I read all the way into the series to book 16. So what's that? We went from book 7 to book 16 in that series. And then, like I said, I think there's only a couple more. In that series, it is kind of a long series. And then when I was looking up, because I realized I'm missing 2 books from the series, I saw that I think she's coming out with another one in 2024. So I'm kind of excited about that. And then lastly, I finished off the month and the year with a digital read, All's Fair in Love and Christmas by Sarah Monzone. This was a sweet and endearing read. I had it on hold for a while. I don't remember who recommended it to me. That's another thing that I kind of want to keep track of better in 2024, is where I'm getting these book recommendations from. But this follows Mackenzie and Mackenzie and Jeremy. Mackenzie and Jeremy work together, and they are both up for a promotion around Christmas time. Their boss likes to, or has this kind of habit of putting up a promotion near Christmas time, and her employees all kind of know this, and so they know as Christmas is coming, somebody's getting promoted, something's going to happen. But this year she has 2 people, Mackenzie and Jeremy, that are up for the same position, and so she is like, we'll just take a look at how the next few weeks go, and I'll be monitoring, and we'll see who gets the promotion. Each has their own reason for wanting this promotion, a very personal reason for wanting it, tied to finances. Jeremy takes care of his niece and nephew whose parents have passed away, and Mackenzie has a mom that is in a care facility that is expensive. And so Mackenzie also suffers with panic disorders and panic attacks. So she very much wants to get this promotion for the sake of her mom, so that she can keep affording her care facility, but also she knows that she's going to struggle with meeting with clients, being able to speak and be comfortable in speaking to a room and things like that. Jeremy is kind of the opposite, where he is very comfortable in a crowd. He can present things. He's very, very organized. But maybe where he is lacking is where Mackenzie's strong suits are. And so they don't talk very much at the beginning, but then of course it follows their relationship, and then we find out who gets the promotion and how it all works out. All in all, I think it was a sweet, endearing book. There is some faith in there, so if that's not your cup of tea, you might not like it, but if it is, I loved it. I loved that it was just kind of in the background there, where when Mackenzie was suffering, she would pray and she would reach out, and I just thought it was a great read. I thought it was a great way to end out my year. So that is it for December and for 2023. The last thing I wanted to tell you about my 2023 reads was, so instead of wrapping up every single book that I read for 2023, because I feel like that would take a really long time, I just want to give you what my 5-star reads were for this year. The first 5-star read that I give, or the first 5-star rating that I give out, was to What If Love Is the Point. This is by Alexa and Carlos Penavega. This one I do own. So this is Living for Jesus in a Self-Consumed World. This book, I know that I did it in one of my wrap-ups, but it's a thin, really quick read, and it goes back and forth from the point of Carlos and Alexa. Carlos was in, I believe there was a show as well. I didn't watch it, and so I'm like, I always get it mixed up. But yes, so he was part of a group, Big Time Rush. I know that they've gone back out. I think they went out back on tour this last year as well. And then Alexa Penavega is best known for her role in Spy Kids, the first two Spy Kids movies. And then they also have a really big YouTube channel, and they kind of taken you along on their life there. And they also have starred in a couple of Hallmark movies together as well. But they are believers, and it kind of goes back and forth, like I said, between each of their stories. And they just talk about, like, what if love is the point? And it's not really their life now, but more so the beginning of the relationship and kind of how they got there. So this was my first 5-star read. I really enjoyed this book. I really like them as a couple, as individuals. I act like I know them. I don't. We don't. I'm not. I mean, we're only friends in my mind, right? The other 5-star read that I gave was The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. This book I actually had checked out the audio version of it with the intent of having my husband listen to it. I thought it would be a book that he liked. But then I ended up listening to it when I was going on my morning walks and things like that. And I just loved it. I think that the audio version was fantastic for me. It reads very much like a conversation. So I think I had tried to read it I don't have this one. I checked it out originally as an ebook and tried to read it, but because it was very conversational, like it's like he's in a conversation with you, it was a little difficult for me to get into. And so then I switched over to the audiobook, and it's him reading to you, and I loved that. I was really able to connect more with that. But I think that this would be a good book to have on your shelf anyways, especially if you're an annotator, because there was a lot in there that I would love to go back to. The next 5-star read that I gave was to the next 5-star rating that I was Rain Rain by Anne Martin. This was for middle grade March. I had never read this before, and it just touched my heart. I am the mom of a special needs child, and it was so good. So good. If you've not heard of this book, it is a middle grade book, and this follows Rose, who is a young girl and is obsessed with homonyms, and so she finds a dog, and she gives the dog the name Rain, Rain. But it kind of follows her story. Can be a tough read because there are some really deep, hard, emotional things that happen in here, but it will pull at your heartstrings, and it is such a good book. The next 5-star read was also for middle grade March, and that was The Giver. I didn't read this when I was in school. I believe I wrapped this up in my middle grade March video, but this was not one of the required readings for us. My son actually read it though, because in his curriculum we had him read it, and I ended up purchasing the other books that go with The Giver. I read The Giver, and then we already had a copy on hand because, like I said, my son had read it, but I wanted to write in the book, and my son does not like to write in his books. So I purchased another used copy just so that I can annotate and write in it and things like that. It's a series, but not in a way that the story picks up from where one leaves off. So we have The Giver. It goes from The Giver, Gathering Blue, and then The Messenger. You'll see that my series books don't match up. And then it wraps up with Sun. And I think at the end of Sun, the book kind of wraps up to the beginning of The Giver that connects these two. But like I said, the series doesn't go in a way that you're picking up the story where it left off and things like that. So, but The Giver was a 5-star read for me. Oops, I'm not even showing you The Giver. The Giver was a 5-star read for me. If you've not read this book, I highly suggest you do. It was really good. I can see why it was a required reading. Then I read The Bound Bookshop of Maggie Banks. I read this back in May and gave this a 5-star read. I think it was just the kind of finding her own voice story. I thought it was interesting because in this story, Maggie, our main character, goes in and she doesn't even really like to read at the beginning of the story, and I just thought that was just a fun little twist in there. Sweet, endearing, kind of a found family type book. Then I keep saying we, and we're in it together. In May, I give 5 stars to Famous for a Living by Melissa Ferguson. Our main character, Kat, is like insta famous. She is a influencer, and that's kind of her world. She just doesn't know much outside that. But of course, scandal hits. She's kind of canceled, and she has to go and figure out what she's going to do next, how she's going to work, how she's going to earn money. Of course, she meets someone who is grumpy, wants nothing to do with social media, and we go from there. So this is a fun read. I read this one as part of the Southern Charm Readathon by book lover Amanda, and that one was, well, speaking of book lover Amanda, she recommends Becky Wade a lot, and I have not read Stay With Me by Becky Wade. This is a Misty River romance. This is another one that I picked up because I had to go back in and annotate it. I had checked it out from the library, but then I knew as I was reading it that I was gonna need to highlight and write in here. This follows Genevieve, who is a Bible study author, and she has quite the story. Her and her sister, along with a couple of other children, were, as children, on a mission trip, and there was a great earthquake. And so they shouldn't have survived, but some of them do. And it goes through in the series and follows their stories, how that's affected their life, how they're living with it now. In this book, like I said, we talk more about Genevieve, how she became a Bible study author, but she also has some secrets of her own, and then as we read through, there are some secrets that maybe her parents are keeping as well. The love interest in this story, they meet quite by accident. She ends up breaking into his like guest cottage and sleeping there, and he finds her in the morning. Sam Turner. Sam Turner is still one of my biggest book crushes. He's just such a sweet, attentive man. So well written. I mean, Becky Wade, it's great. This is my favorite book though I think it's a trilogy. This is my favorite one, so that was a definite 5-star. Then I got to read a digital arc of Taco Falls Apart by Brenda S. Miles. This book is a children's book, but it was so neat. I ended up reading it myself. Then I read it to all of my kids and my husband. Like I flipped through it and read with them. It's just a sweet story about how sometimes we all kind of fall apart, but we are still awesome anyways. It's about this taco who, his shell, he's holding so much in, he falls apart, and how the little condiments and food next to him are like, hey, sometimes that happens, but we still love you. It's such a sweet, light read. It's only 32 pages, but awesome. Then the next 5-star was To the Happy Life of Isadora Bentley. This was another just endearing read. As you can see, most of my books are these light-hearted contemporary romance things. Isadora is turning 30, and she is just content of following rules and just going through the motions and going through life. But on her 30th birthday, she picks up a magazine with a title like 31 Ways to Be Happy. And so she sets off on this project of how to do all 31 items. It's just it's a fun, neat read. Feel good, again, story. Then my next 5-star read was my first Brandon Sanderson book. I don't know, I just feel like I couldn't really call myself a fantasy reader if I hadn't picked up a Sanderson book, but my first book that I read by him was Tress of the Emerald Sea, and I think that it is not his normal type of book that he puts out, but oh man, it was so good. I really hope to purchase the edition that I got to check out from the library. I hope that I can purchase that at some point in the future because it was just beautiful. The illustrations in there, I just added to the book, and it was so fun. I loved the world that he built. This is about Tress, and she lives in a very poor island, on a very poor island, and it is surrounded by this sea that it's not made up of water, but these very dangerous like creatures. And so it is dangerous to go out, and nobody ever really leaves. You have to have a boat made of a certain material in order to travel. But like I said, the island is not very rich, and so most people never leave the island. But Tress collects cups from different islands, from different places. When the ports come in, people have started knowing her as this cup collector, so they'll bring her cups, and it's the kind of her connection to the outside world. But as we go on, we follow Tress, and she finds this strength in her that maybe she didn't know was there. There is romance in it. All the way to the very end. I remember when I was reading this book, like even the last 100 pages, there was a twist, and I was like, what? The whole book just flipped for me, and I was like, oh my gosh. The whole way through it kept my attention. I absolutely loved it. 5 stars. And then the last 5-star for the year I gave out in September was to My Foolish Heart by Susan May Warren. This is actually book 4 in a series, and this was recommended by Oshina from Oshina's Gotta Read 'Em All. And she does say that you can pick up the books in any order. And so I went ahead and I picked up this one, the one that she was recommending. I picked that one up first. And so this follows another Isadora. This one is Isadora Presley, and she is the host of a talk show, a radio talk show. Most people don't know that she is the host of this talk show because she doesn't usually leave her home. She has, since her mom has passed, and her dad was very seriously injured in a car accident, she has found it very, very difficult to leave her house. And she suffers with panic and anxiety, and she has a best friend that has like kind of stuck with her and brings her groceries when she can't get out, or kind of just talks her through and helps her. In this story, she gets a new neighbor, Caleb. Caleb has served a duty in Iraq and comes home very changed. And so he's kind of keeping his own secrets. And because they are neighbors, they do kind of interact more, but they're both keeping their secrets, and it kind of goes from there. And the story unfolds how they can maybe help each other, how they do help each other, how each person kind of starts to heal and share. And it's such a beautiful story. So that was it for my 5-star reads for 2023. I have not set my 2024 goals yet. I do plan on going in and sharing with you maybe some of them. I have signed up for a couple of reading challenges, like year-long reading challenges, but that'll come in another video. Thanks so much for hanging out with me in this one. I hope that it's not too long. It probably will be. I know I like to ramble, but as always, if you don't know, or you just need to be reminded, maybe the one to tell you you are deeply and truly loved and so appreciated. I really, truly appreciate you taking your time out and spending it here with me. I can't thank y'all enough for helping this little channel grow this year. I'm looking forward to 2024 and what we'll read together. Thanks so much for hanging out with me.